Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show, and I've been looking forward to this interview for the whole of the show because I'm joined now by Cindy Jackson. She's just written a new book called How Not To Get Botched. Now, Cindy, I know you've had various monikers over the years in the tabloid press, many of which you just reject and you don't like, described as a human Barbie. People started tottering up how many procedures you had. Let's just go back to the beginning. When you had your first procedure, why was that? What motivated you to want to get surgery in the first place? I think back in the 1980s, right?
Back in the 80s, yes. I'd been an art student, and I was well aware that my proportions and my face were not attractive in terms of artistic. Well, the way you would look at a person, if you were going to create a painting or a sculpture, there are certain proportions you use and certain ways you portray your work of art to be attractive to most people. And I'd also been teased a little bit in school about my big chin and my big nose. And I decided, using cosmetic surgery, I would change myself to look the best I possibly could. And at that time, no one had ever done this before. I was the first extreme makeover. Yes. I pioneered using surgery to completely change your looks, as opposed to just having a facelift or a nose job. I had everything.
And you were happy with the results?
I was very happy with the results. I approached it very scientifically, very carefully. I never got botched. I never made mistakes. And I see people nowadays making so many errors in judgment and listening to misinformation that it's not the way I did it. And I would like to help people realize there are better ways. There's a correct way to go about it.
Yes. I mean, one of the advantages, and although you don't like the way that you've been labelled with regard to how many procedures you've had, you have had quite a few. Therefore, that gives you a unique perspective on how to go about things safely, how to choose the right surgeon, which is critical. Mm-hmm. And also what your book covers is not just the dangers from surgery, but also non-surgical procedures. Tell me a little bit about how you've been a consultant for the last, I think, 35 years with people who want to go under the knife. What kind of advice do you give them, and what errors do they usually make?
Well, in the beginning, in the late 80s, when I had a lot of press coverage, because at that time nobody had had so much surgery. And nowadays, a lot of people, thousands, have had way more than I have. They would approach me to find out how I did what I did, and I would guide them. And usually they'd come to me without having anything done whatsoever. Nowadays, people come to see me and they've already had a few things done, and more often than not, they're not happy with everything they had done, or they've been botched, or they spent too much money, or they see no difference.
Yes.
So I now spend a lot of the consultations I do unpicking the previous treatment and trying to find a way to put it right. And that's all new to me because, well, little by little, the number of dissatisfied patients has crept up to the point where now it's an epidemic. I mean, it's quite incredible. And when I say botched, I mean people who have spent too much, who just aren't happy, who don't look any different, all the way to people who are disfigured for life.
And when you say disfigured, is that largely from surgical procedures, or are we talking about fillers? Because I know you raise serious concerns about fillers in the book.
Yes. Some of the worst problems I've ever seen are from permanent fillers. They can cause systemic infections, which are very, very difficult to deal with.
So we're not just talking about trout pout here, but we're also talking about the effect on the actual skin and muscles in the face.
And the entire system.
Yes.
People have been on very strong antibiotics for years with some of these fillers.
Really?
And they've had repeated surgery to have them removed. And you can't always remove it when it's dispersed throughout your skin underneath the dermis. And
do you think as these procedures have become more kind of commonplace, like these days you can get Botox and fillers at a beauty salon, whereas it used to be much more medicalised, has that created this problem?
That's part of the problem. I mean, the problem is multifactorial. Instagram is a problem for patients who look at these before and after pictures and think those are real.
Yes.
They've not been filtered. Some have been filtered, some have not.
People are getting fillers when what they need is a filter.
Exactly. But, I mean, you can buy fillers on Alibaba. You can order them online. And people can set themselves up as an injector without having any medical training and without using the name brand products. You don't know what's being injected.
There was an interesting Mirror investigation today in the Sunday Mirror, and the headline is age 17 and offered lip fillers with no checks on ID. 17's too young to have fillers, isn't it? Would you like to see an age limit on some of these procedures?
Well, yes, there should be a bit more judgment being used and common sense. I mean, I didn't start having anything done until I was in my mid-30s. That's not to say that if there's an indication for something being done, you can't start a bit younger. But that's insane. Young girls in their teens, they have a natural beauty. They have youth. They have so many things on their side.
But what do you think about the social media effect? Because you've talked about Instagram, you've talked about people trying to kind of achieve these completely unrealistic ideals about how they look, particularly for younger people. Have we become a more sort of narcissistic society, do you think, where people are wanting these tweakments because they're seeking perfection? Actually, it's quite hard to achieve that in anyone.
It is. I don't know if it's narcissism or if it's trying to keep up. It's the new version of keeping up with the Joneses. You know, and young girls are under so much pressure with their peers and trying to look like the Instagram pictures. I don't think it's ego so much as insecurity.
Yes. And perhaps social media kind of encourages that insecurity, particularly in the young. Now, you say about how not to get botched. What are some of your top tips? If somebody does want to go for a procedure, what's the main piece of advice you give them, the first piece of advice, Cindy?
The biggest problem with people having unsatisfactory procedures is misinformation.
Yeah.
And you need to double check, triple check everything you're told. Don't just see something online and go, oh, I'll act on that. And that is rife, even among really intelligent people who should know better.
Yes.
I'd say definitely buy my book. It's only $19.95, which is about 16 pounds.
Yes.
There's so much information and there's so many warnings and so many things to red
and
flags to look for.
The book makes the point, by the way, that a lot of the people you help have gone to qualified surgeons, reputable people, and not kind of flying off to Turkey or wherever to have procedures done.
These are people who thought they did everything right. They thought they did the research. And then when they realized where they went wrong, it was just a basic error. And all these basic errors, there's about 10 of them, are in the book. They're analyzed for people to look at and say, okay, I won't make that mistake. Basically, I want people to dodge bullets, having read this book, and
they can get
all laid
the book
out there.
where? It's on your website.
It's on my website, cindyjackson.com, available for immediate download.
Can I just say, I'm trying to do the maths. You said you had your first procedures in the 1980s and you were in your mid-30s.
That's right.
Cindy, you're looking good for whatever age you are. Do you want to give me a ballpark?
Late 60s.
Late 60s. Cindy Jackson, honestly. Now, you can get How Not To Get Botched on Cindy's website, as we've just said.